this. So if you could just give you a previous kind of career in agriculture or food before prior to starting Agri Ledger.
Okay, so actually, I do not have a background in food or agriculture. I'm just a foodie, but I did find out that it's in the blood because my father's family had land in Haiti, and actually my uncle was the Minister of Agriculture twice in Haiti, and he was responsible for bringing back the cotton industry in Haiti. My background is actually, I'm a biochemist by training. By the way, I'm Genevieve from Agri Ledger, and I studied biochemistry with a minor in comparative ledger, which is what gives me the gift of the gab. And then I got involved in healthcare research. I actually worked in cancer research for several years, and then moved into technology because I thought that would be fun. Ended up working at MTV Network and thought that was too much for me. So I went into banking. So I have about 25 years in banking, doing straight through processing and really looking on how to get information across. When I discovered blockchain in 2015, it was actually on a project in South Africa, which was an impact project with one of the major banks in the UK and South Africa, looking at how to impact the life of women, actually young girls, and through that, through the stakeholder, actually bring it all the way to their family, the shebeen, and all the individual, and involve healthcare and all of that. And I was like, oh my God, this technology is amazing. And for me, it wasn't about the tokenization to create new currency, but it was more about how could you remove double work and have straight through processing, which is what I had done for 25 years in banking. So I then said, what is it that I'm passionate about? And my passions are travel and food. And having grown up in Haiti, where we basically have concerns at times with food safety and food security, I didn't suffer from it, but I did see children in the street or people starving. And I've gotten to travel the world, and unfortunately, I've seen too much of it. And I thought, how do I actually affect this technology and give those who are providing us food the ability to participate? Because if we look at the stats, it's crazy. You look at what the FAO talks about, that if we don't change things by 2050, there will not be enough food to feed the world. Well, there is enough food to feed the world. The problem is that a lot of it goes to waste. At least 40% of what is grown goes to waste because it doesn't get to market, it's spoiled, or it's just plain bad. And when we look at the statistics around food safety, I don't know how many people have gotten sick from eating a bad meal. Unfortunately, I've had food poisoning twice. It's not fun. And food poisoning is one part of it. About 400,000 people die every year from food poisoning, and 40% of those are children under the age of 2. So if we look at the loss in human capital, just from that, it's tremendous. So I thought a system using the blockchain gives us the ability to create trust in something which we need trust in, which is our food system. It also creates better capital access for farmers, because now we can trust that the goods are coming from where they are. I'm not going to say that it's going to be for every farmer, every crop, but there is a fundamental that's happening. 70% of the food grown in the world is grown in eaten in the world is grown in developing countries, which means that most of it is coming up to the West. And we don't trust it. We trust what is grown next to us because we believe that there are ethical aspect to how we choose to live our lives. This is not to say that those farmers in those developing countries are unethical, but there are quite a few people throughout the chain which are unnecessary. So it's not about removing middlemen, but it's about rehabilitation of roles and responsibility and accountability. And then through that, also removing risks, because if you have better assurance as to where something comes from, how much is going to get paid, and who is going to get paid, then everyone has less of speculation doing. And you don't need to speculate that you're actually getting the goods. And this problem is known. We talk about just the food poisoning, but we know, like, say, fish is a big issue in the UK with fish, in not knowing the fish not being from where it says it's coming. That fundamentally is a problem, because if the fish has not been kept properly, it's going to make people sick. So it's a health issue also.
So we've talked about food safety, and you talked about a 70% of the world's food, particularly from agriculture, coming from developing nations. I want to talk about Haiti for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you're from there. So what's the situation like there at the moment? Because all we see is kind of negativity and like just there's instability, and like what's the situation like on the ground for farmers or people who work in agriculture there?
So Haiti, I think as a nation has not been lucky from the beginning. It's very strong. It's a very strong country because it was the first Black nation to actually gain its independence through force and will. And then they did something which was pretty crazy. They burnt all the sugarcane. This was one way of making sure that the European didn't come back. And what that created was actually market embargo for over 100 years, because they could not actually sell to the US because they were a Black nation, and US at the time still had slavery. So for about 100 years, they were locked down. You don't have big ship enough to be able to go to France. You're paying the equivalent of 20 or $40 million back to the French. So it was pretty hard. Now, it would have been great if we would have been able to rise, Haiti would have been able to rise from that and move on. Unfortunately, the individuals which have been at the helm of the country in the last few years have not played fair with her. And what has happened is that money that came in for infrastructure was not used. It was actually instead embezzled. Those individuals are no longer there, but still that left a lot of scar in the country. I was speaking to someone yesterday and they said, not my problem, but think about some of these people where you have no access to healthcare, you have no access to education, you don't know how to get your kids to school, you don't know where your food is coming from. People have very good will, they're very nice and happy generally. They're not asking for a lot. But when you look at a country where about $1 billion worth of food is bought in per year, and 1 billion is bought in order to create input for things like cornflakes and wheats and things like that, then starts wondering, mostly when this country is probably one of the most fertile lands in the world, what's going on? And the fundamental issue are those in the middle who are trying to take more than they just deserve. We really hope that with this project, we're able to make a difference, because if it goes through, it will create influx of cash in the hand of the people to whom it belongs to. So we talk about the mango and the avocado. Right now, the reality is that the avocado, which is grown in Haiti, is sold across the border to the Dominican Republic and then sold to the US and to the rest of the markets. Fundamentally, this negativity about Haiti that is always out there causes issues in that people do not trust or do not want to get involved because of the risk, the systemic risk of stopping. So we need a break to get the flow going. to get the money in the pocket of the people to feed their belly with food, to then allow for the continuation and for the growth. Because in my point of view, what Haiti needs right now is really an agricultural revolution. We grow millet, we grow wheat, we grow cotton, we grow avocados, the mangoes. I'm telling you, they are the best in the world. What I'd love to see is for it to get to these shores. But in order to get to these shores, we need to have the infrastructure to be able to carry it, which means roads. We need to have electricity that you can actually know you're going to have, not generators where you're burning gas in order to be able to have electricity. A country cannot survive in this way. And I believe the blockchain could be a way through, because no one is siphoning the cash in between. So if I owe you a dollar comes to you, which means you can plan. Because one of the things about those farmers is they know the value. They just don't, desperation makes you take 40%. You'll take 40 cents instead of not having any money in your hand.
This is a very good segue into our next topic, where we go into blockchain, where you provide a solution. So we're going to go into it.
Yes.
Where does blockchain come into this? Because you've answered part of this question already, but you might as well carry on. So I'm just going to let you.
Blockchain is central to this. One of the central aspects is ownership. And the blockchain gives you the ability to demonstrate ownership in an electronic way, and to demonstrate also the provenance. So it's not about provenance just so that you know where it comes from, but it's allowing the farmer to actually say, I gave this to this person at this time, and they promised to get it to here by this time. And if they do, this is how much I'm going to make, and it's how much I'm going to pay them. Many a time what will happen is people will actually say, I'll take it for you, I'll get the best price, and then they turn around, they don't tell you what the real price was, and you get less as a result because you don't have the access to the market. That's a fundamental issue. So this way the farmer can demonstrate that they have given it to a service provider. The service provider has to do certain steps, get it out by a certain time, make sure that they follow the certification that are necessary. And if they do so, they are promised a certain price. And what we do is we then have the broker. The broker doesn't work for the service provider anymore. He works for the farmer. So he's incentivized to get the best price, because the best price he gets, the more his commission. At the end, when it's paid, everybody gets paid. And that's another part of our blockchain, in that we not only are tracking I would call them the toll gates, but we're also looking to track what he's actually received. So if the good sells for $1 and 10% was owed to the broker, 50 cents is to the service provider, then the rest goes into the farmer, and everybody gets paid at the same time. Versus today, what would happen is the payment comes in to the broker, who then has to make sure, has it clear my account? And once it's clear his account, he pays everybody else.
And so how do we go about replacing this old model that we have into a new one where it's blockchain or DLT related?
I think it's I'm finding it to where it has its challenges, because the farmer at this point is the least powerful, and that's part of the problems in agriculture, in that because they don't have the total access to market, they are then relying on others to do this for them. So if you can get the farmers to agree, and then you get the brokers, because the broker wants to sell. He's a sales guy. All he wants is, I want quality and I want to get to market. Then you can start rehabilitating the middle, which is the people who have to provide the service. So either they provide the service or they don't provide a service. One of the key things I think is important is understanding the processes and what is required. So this is the approach that we have, is that it doesn't matter what the produce, it is a commodity. What are necessary to assure quality, or also what is desired, and then getting it to market with assurance that all has been taken care of is really what's key. So I've been working with this organization called Forfana, and they've been doing it in a non-digital, somewhat digital. They have been hashing some stuff to the blockchain, but now they're interested in taking it into a different realm, which is to get the money over to the farmers. Guess what? The farmer would not, nobody wants to wait 100 days for your payout. That's 60 to 120 days are the terms. No one wants that. But I want to be assured I'm going to be paid my fair share. I don't also want to take a 40% discount on my funds in order to get cash right now, if I can be assured that the cash is going to come to me. So what you will find is that at first it'll be difficult. It will have its challenges, but eventually, as people start understanding and seeing the money coming into their pocket, to their wallet, then there will be much more of a movement toward that. But it is, when I first started the journey, I kind of had my doubts, because I kept going, I go to the supermarket and there's 2 apples. One costs $1.50 a pound and the other one costs 20 cents a pound. What makes me decide which one I want to get? Really, at times, it's going to be my means. But even if I pick the cheaper one, I want to know what the quality of it is, that it is a quality that I expect it to be. And at that point, where my doubt came in, and I was like, what is the value added to this? And what we have actually found that is the value added is the fact that we are compensating everyone on the chain. So the customer can have a view. So because this is one of the other things we're doing, is that we're giving the customer the ability to see the whole journey from when it started all the way, in all the places it's been. So which means you can even look at carbon footprint. And if you are able to get that kind of information through the customer, then you can start re-educating everyone, not only on the impact of the food that we eat, but also the carbon footprint when we look at climate control and all these things, which are becoming real issues for the world at large.
So on a personal level, where did you first find out about blockchain and its uses, and how it could provide such a solution to everything you've just described?
So as I mentioned, I actually first heard about blockchain or Bitcoin when I was leaving my job at RBS. At RBS, I led a group called Solutions Team, and our role was looking at alleviating the issues that our customers were having and how we would be able to support straight-through processing and all those things. And I was sitting with my friends from SAP on my going away dinner, and they told me about Bitcoin. Next week, I started with a company called IdenTrust, and IdenTrust did identity management. And 2 days in, my boss called me and said, would you mind going to South Africa? Because there's a project, and at the time, this was when R3 had just started. It was 7 people at the time. And we met down in South Africa with the Pratik Foundation and Stellar to talk about how we would look to deal with the alleviation of poverty and financial inclusion with young girls. And the age was between the age of 13 to 16. And that's how it really fired me. My role there was looking at digital identity, because I believe that's one of the things that we need to solve. And I kind of like to sometimes make a joke to say blockchain is nothing but digital identity on acid, because there's a whole bunch of X509 all stringed up together to make better security. So I then had the pleasure, and I think that's the pleasure really, of getting involved with the project and really looking at the opportunities around Horizon 2020. This was 2015, summer of 2015, which means a lot of people didn't know about blockchain. It wasn't as popular as it is today. So I got to meet some of the pioneers in the space, and really get to share with them the ideas and possibility of where we could go with this. I go back and I look at some of my papers and I'm like, wow, we were thinking about these use cases, and there's some that I still haven't seen come to light. Healthcare was something that I talked about in the fall of 2015, in winter of 2016. And I did some papers on that. And I still don't see the healthcare space pushing the envelope as much. And part of the reason, and that's why I chose agriculture, is there's too many very powerful people already in the space. So rebalancing that power is very difficult, versus at the end of the day, we all eat. And if you can't eat, you're either being fed through tubes or you're dead. So we all need food to survive. Couldn't figure out how to do water, because that's the other thing we need to survive, but food was fundamental. And I thought, this is not just about solving the problem, but creating through that awareness of what we could do with the technology, because so many people will be affected, and really galvanizing the opportunity for others to get involved.
And so I assume this led to the what would become Agri Ledger.
It did, because what I did is that after Identrust, I ended up working with Cripsy, which was one of the first it was the first Indian blockchain company looking to provide services. It came from this idea of digital identity, and they had been doing a wallet called YPay Cash, and YPay Cash was then the Indian governments changed the rules of how you could actually hold in escrow. And so they thought, oh, let's get into the blockchain space. And that's where I had the opportunity to actually put papers on healthcare, banking, insurance, you name it. We did even on cars, how would somebody who, auto shop be able to provide credit on a car, and that car being registered on the blockchain would allow you to be able to register for your driver's license and all insurance. It was just lovely. And I'm seeing some projects which are coming in this way, and even looking at the share economy. I have a friend of mine who's doing something in the share economy with the cars, and it's in that vein. And so the only challenge was I was the only one in London. It was a startup, and I was sitting in the UK and they were all in India, and that created a very difficult situation on how to be able to collaborate effectively. And then there was a contest which was run by UK Innovate on how would you, it was with also Singularity University, how would you use technology today to impact the life of millions? And I thought this, if we take mobile, blockchain, identity, and data, you can then really affect the life of millions, because you can rebalance the credit, you can rebalance the risk, you can get information in a way that can be trusted. we are able to communicate much more effectively today, but we don't trust that the person on the other end is who they say they are. If we have a system which can allow us to be able to trust that it is who we say it is coming from where it is, and here's, the IoT and the data, the geolocator, which show you this information, and nobody can mess around with it, then it makes it easier. So for me, it was a natural progression after what was 25 years of working in an organization where I was helping change. I was the change agent in those companies. I was the one who pushed the technology, and I brought new technology or a new way of doing things to the organization. And I thought, well, might as well try and do it in another realm and really try and affect something which is not just the bottom line of a big corporation.
And so with Agri Ledger, which I feel like it kind of is, again, another nice segue into the company. It's almost like a story of like in different chapters, really, the way we're describing it. But what were the fundamental objectives or the sort of fundamental rules, if you like, of like what you set out to achieve?
I would love to say that it was a very straight direction and that it's been an easy journey. No easy journey is worth traveling in reality. And as such, I think that the ideals are still there. And we are now able to act on it. One of the things I had thought was very important was to have the support and involvement of government, because as you change aspects of risk, you're also changing the amount that people are receiving. And it's not the increased ones who are going to scream, it's the ones whose income you're decreasing who are going to make the most noise. So it's important to have a government which helps supports that. Also, I think that 3 years ago, the technology was not as developed as it is today, and we didn't understand many of it. So blockchain has moved into DLT. There are people who like to be purists to say, well, DLT is not blockchain, it's just a database, distributed database. At the end, the blockchain itself is a distributed database. Now, we need to look at different ways to be able to use distributed trust system to be able to create better collaboration across people, because collaboration always has still where one party is trying to get the most. As human, that is our human nature, to actually try to get the most for ourselves, because we fear extension if we don't have enough and we are not able to save enough. So if you have a system whereby each person can actually trust that every party is telling the truth, then you can start collaborating more effectively. And that's why, so for me, I don't think that the use case of agriculture is the only one. But once, it's like, I remember years ago when the internet first came in, this tells you how old I am, trying to explain to people, why would you use the internet to book your travel? Today, no one would ever question, why would I put my credit card into the system? They just accept it. And I think that no one goes around and says, what is TCP/IP, or asks for TCP/IP to be explained to them. And we will get there one day with the blockchain also. You'll just know that the system that is the underlying system is a trust system, which means that the data that you're receiving from that system is the truth. Well, truth at the time of the action happening, but not one where somebody goes in the back end and changes, or someone withholds information from you, which is critical to either your well-being or your information.
Given the current climate we're in now, I record this on October 2019, and there is a huge um, awareness of environmental and climate change protests and people wanting change. I want to know what your thoughts are around this and where the connection could be with blockchain technology.
So actually, we have been talking. It's very interesting, but we have been talking for the last year and a half. Actually, yeah, year and a half around the use of data for climate data. So I'm not sure if you're aware of European Space Agency has these satellites in the air called Sentinel. Sentinel-3 went up last March. And the beauty about this is that it can measure at a very, I think it's like 3x3, the Earth, and get information such as the nutrients, the water content, and even bacteria. And that is something which is tremendously important because the water, if the water table are at the right level, you can now provide information to farmers to let them know that they don't need to use as much water as possible as they think it is. So you can, and also the chemicals which are needed for them to help them grow. Because I'm sorry, with some of the changes that we're having in climate, it is necessary to know what the weather is going to be like. And if that information can be imparted to them, it can help in not having as much waste. Because what we think about climate control is just, the carbon use, but there's all those storms that are happening. And if you're going to have a big storm coming in, you can tell the farmer ahead of time to do the harvesting, at least you don't have 100% loss. You might have 60%, but 40% is better than nothing. And then the other thing is that through the blockchain technology, as I mentioned before, as we're keeping track of how something is getting to the customer, we can now start measuring the carbon footprint and making choices to actually understand what we're buying and how much effect is it actually having in our overall climate agenda.
So right now, in 2019, we have different types of blockchains. Of course, we have ones that can produce 1 to 3 transactions a second. Some we can transact with 10 to 12, some even more, way more. So tying it all in, where do you think we are with blockchain at this moment in time? Do you think it's still very, very early days in its infancy, or are we starting to see things that are now, doing 1,000, processes per second and so on and so forth? Where do you think we're at, in your opinion?
I don't think that transaction per second is, to me, as important as resiliency. Because in reality, even when we talk about some of the networks, some of the database networks such as Visa and others, yes, they're fast, but at the end of the day, it's a ledger system, which means that the transaction will eventually happen and there's crawlback aspects to it. For many of the solutions that we can look to implement with blockchain, I don't think speed is as necessary as being able to say, so I write it and then I get back the information later. Speed is not so that instant gratification is not really key as much as trust to me. Now, getting back to your question, I still think that, it's no longer a baby. It's no longer just crawling. It's starting to walk. And as it walks, it's bumping into the walls because it still needs to hold itself up. But very soon, it'll be able to run. I also believe that we will not end up with one blockchain. we will end up with various, or DLT, distributed ledger technology. We will have different ones which will support different use cases or different industry. So the same way you have SAP, Oracle, Microsoft SQL, you will have large players, and those will, in my point of view, become what we call the bottom chain technology. I'm not sure how many breakout we will have, because the aspect of the environment is already being, you've got all the big players coming in already. You've got the IBM, you've got the Oracle even coming in and becoming very involved. So I don't think that there is going to be a lot of opportunity for small players to take over. You might see some winners in terms of people like Multichain and Stellar, but they've been entrenched for a while. But fundamentally, one of the aspects that a lot of people are, I got to work with some companies in China before, and I think one of the things which is really fundamental to this whole journey is security. And unfortunately, technologists these days sometimes forget to take care of that, or they say, oh, we'll take care of it later. And that's really the spear in the heart for them, because that will kill you in 2 seconds. Large organizations are, such as the Marriotts of the world, are able to withstand attacks, and so hackers attack, they can withstand that. But if you're a smaller company, your reputation and also the damage that is created, very difficult to get over. So I think that we may see someone coming up front. You've already have like the big players such as R3, Corda, Hyperledger with IBM, and then you have on the fringes the likes of, as I mentioned, Multichain and Stellar. And then the next one that's coming in, which could be, we'll see how it is Telegram with the TON network. And that's a pure, again, a blockchain infrastructure. So with those coming down the pipe, it'll be interesting to see what will happen to the ecosystem. But I expect that we'll end up with about 5 to 6 big players at the end of the day.
It's interesting you mentioned things like Stellar, and there are also coins such as Amisigo, which is very popular in places like Thailand because of, most people around the world, but particularly in Southeast Asia, don't have access to a bank account, but they do have access to a mobile phone. So they're able to make these transactions and pay for goods, whatever they may be. And I think that for farmers, possibly in terms of Agri Ledger, most of them, I would imagine in Haiti, have access to a cell phone or a mobile phone, but don't have bank accounts. So this could be one solution that could work.
Yeah, my whole thing is, though, I am not advocating any crypto or digital currency. I'm also, for my project in Haiti, not, I'm bound not to use it because I think that it's not, digitization of currency, of fiat currency, is already happening. When I look at my bank account, I have a digital representation of what is in my bank account, but I don't have access to that money in physical. And that's where we need to get these people to, because if we try, in my point of view, if we try to give them a token, and I'm not very, being a finance person, a treasurer, I'm not really keen on these things which are pegged to something that there's no control of. We don't have control of currency, I know that, because the government does, but at least I'm much more comfortable with something where it is accepted and sanctified by a government to have a certain value. That value could end up going down because of inflationary or deflationary actions, but then at least I have some sort of insurance, versus a lot of these tokens it's an individual or company saying, well, trust me, it's backed by this, 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 this. And what are their influence in terms of making sure that my cash comes to me? So it may change, so that those are things that could in the next 5 to 10 years change, and I change my view to it. But it's kind of like the liquidity in those companies is not there. Liquidity is there with government because at least they can print cash if they need to.
And so what would you advise people who are in the food or agriculture or even the environmental sectors that want to get into blockchain technology and do what Agri Ledger are doing? What would you say?
I think that it's important to understand your process and then look at where are your issues with trust. And those are the parts that you want to sort of address. But one of the things that is very key is to not forget the human factor, because you're dealing with human, and don't think that you can just replace all the interaction by putting a computer between you and the farmer. So you need to also look at building in how do you maintain those human relationships and have a way to be able to provide information back of value. So communication as to what's happening and communication on how to improve. So I actually would love to see more people looking at how to mitigate this. And I do know that there are a lot of large organizations looking at this, but I think in my point of view, there are going to be those of us who are much more knowledgeable about the process. And then there are those of us who are going to be the technologists in there, and we need to collaborate together. And that is how to then assure. And it needs to be where the impact is really looking at the smallholder farmer for me. That's where, the individual. So I like to think that our customers are at both end of the spectrum. The farmer who needs to be paid and needs to be assured, and the customer who needs to be assured and know that the money that they're paying is fair. Because if we don't deal with this, in my point of view, we're going to hit that shortage, and food will be much more expensive than it is already. So we need to assure how can we actually see how not only there's enough food to feed the world, but how do we also get youth? Because that's another issue, another big issue right now. The average age of a farmer globally is about 56, 57 years old. So unless we can get other people to start growing the food, and I think technology allows you to then be able to do more than one thing, and it can then become more lucrative for the farmer or for the youth who goes into farming, and then allows him to have a family and survive through that. Nowadays, most parents who are farmers will tell their kids, no, you need to go and do something else. We need to be able to allow them to be, to have the opportunity to actually work with the earth, but also be able to have a fair living.
Absolutely. And is there anything else you'd like to add that I may not have touched upon?
I think that where I'm much more excited about this is really the aspect of how it can be used in the developing world. Africa and Asia are the breadbaskets of the world. And to some extent, Latin America also provides quite a bit. And I have seen a lot of interest coming out from those areas to actually get involved and to learn more about the blockchain technology. And if we can create the opportunity. And this is what's so great about the time that we live today, is you don't need to be living in the same city or the same town or the same country to collaborate, because you can all get onto things like Zoom and communicate effectively. So it's not only about the farmers, it's also about the technology. And that 4IR that we talk about, the fourth industrial revolution, being a revolution which is not just in the West, but also, and it's a global revolution and gives opportunities to everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Genevieve. If people want to find you or find out more about Agri Ledger, where can they go?
So we have our website, agriledger.io. I am on LinkedIn, so Genevieve Leveille. I also have my page on Facebook, on Instagram. So I'm a social media maven, and we are also very active on Twitter. And I would love to speak to anyone. And part of what I also enjoy is mentoring and helping people move along their journey.
Fantastic. That's really great to know for our students as well, or anyone watching this. So once again, thank you so much for your time. It was really, really insightful to learn more about this. And there were many things I didn't know myself. So it was a wonderful glimpse into this sector. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, that was really, really good.
Yeah, let me stop.
Really happy.